Cocaine is an inexpensive legal import, widely used in America to add pep and vigor. Dr. Hamilton Wright, an anti-opium crusader, even suggests cocaine be supplied to African-American dock workers and laborers to increase their productivity. And it is. From an on-the-job pep pill, it became a recreational intoxicant, not out of choice, but rather out of a lack of choice. After the Civil War, alcohol consumption among minorities was banned. It was a post-Civil War, racially motivated policy maintained in southern states that asserted an intoxicated African American was dangerous. That reasoning in time spread to cocaine.
All of our drug laws have originally been based on racism, on prejudice against ethnic minorities and their particular customs or their perceived customs. In other words, all of these laws are based on the belief that there is a class in society which can control themselves, and there is a class in society which cannot.
The attitude that some classes of people should not be allowed to be intoxicated was a widely held belief in American politics. In 1901, the U.S. Senate passes a resolution introduced by Henry Cabot Lodge to ban the sale of liquor and opiates to all, quote, uncivilized races. Among them are Aboriginal peoples, Eskimos, Hawaiians, railroad workers, and immigrants in port cities. Cocaine escapes the resolution simply because it is relatively unknown beyond the South. But a decade later, it comes to the attention of the nation when headlines report that cocaine is a new Southern menace. The drug is embroiled in the racial tensions of the times.
Around the turn of the century was the peak of lynching of blacks, and also was the peak of taking voting rights away from blacks. So there was a lot of tension between blacks and whites, and much of the violence of blacks against whites was explained by saying they took cocaine.
In attempting to arrest a hitherto peaceful Negro who had become crazed by cocaine, a police officer in self-defense drew his revolver, placed the muzzle over the Negro's heart, and fired. And yet this bullet did not even stagger the crazed Negro, and neither did a second bullet.
That's part of the drug mythology.
You guys are so...
That in the latter part of the 19th century, there were stories circulating. The phrase was cocaine-crazed Negro in the South, and coming from newspapers that local law enforcement officials claimed that they need a higher caliber bullet to use on a black person under the influence of cocaine, because anything less would not bring him down.
In the eyes of Southern white society, the outrageous conduct of African Americans goes from bad to worse when scandalous sex is added to the trouble that cocaine causes.
There was concern that if an African American man took cocaine, he would be in such a sexually charged state, he would just rape every white woman he saw.
Yeah, just white
Again,
women.
It has less to do with the drugs, and I think more to do with racial fears and tensions at the time.
As with opium smoking in San Francisco 50 years earlier, the idea that a drug is used to seduce white women is the final straw. Southern states finally ban cocaine, but the ban only makes the drug illegal, not unavailable. Local bootblacks and newsboys become pushers. For 10 cents, a customer gets a sniff. For a quarter, a day's supply in a pillbox. But this law is only a local law. There are still no federal laws against the use of any drug in the United States. While some states make it a crime for African Americans to use cocaine in the South, there are no restrictions for using medicines that contain it. The reasoning, as embodied in the laws of the day, is that it's perfectly legitimate to use a drug to make you feel better when you are sick. But it's not legitimate to use a drug to change your mood if you are already feeling good. Ironically, it is the medicinal use of cocaine that leads to addiction. After 4 decades of uncontrolled use, cocaine-laced medicines ultimately turns into an epidemic.
The peak in our addiction, in the addiction in the United States, is probably about 1900, when, by some estimates, about 5% of the American public was addicted to one or more of these drugs. There was a great addiction problem among